And I'm Kirsty.
And this is our podcast covering the highs, lows and realities of parenting a child with neurodiversity.
Each week we'll be sharing updates from our lives and hearing from a variety of guests about their advice and experiences.
This is Love Needs No Words. Hello and welcome to this episode of Love Needs No Words. Today we are joined by Mary Long-Dhonau OBE. Mary is known for her work for going above and beyond to support victims of flooding. But at home, she's mum to Peter, who is 28, non-speaking and autistic. Mary wrote so eloquently on LinkedIn about how difficult it can be to parent an adult with severe needs. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure.
Thank you. So would you start by telling us a bit about Peter?
Well, yes, Peter is 28, as you've said. He's 6'3". He's a big bear of a man. He's loud. He's exuberant and very affectionate, but he's also suffers from severe autism, severe learning disability, and he's epileptic as well. So life for him is very tough and quite often very frightening.
What were the early days like, Mary? Sort of how did his autism present itself and what were sort of his main challenges?
Well, first of all, I have to say that he was one of 5 children. He was the youngest. Had he been the first, I don't know whether there'd have been any more, but his development was perfectly normal through the first year of his life. In fact, I would say he was advanced for his age. I'll give you some examples. On his first birthday, he had 12 words. I kept a diary of the first year of his life. And on his first birthday, I wrote down all the words he could say. His first word was book when he was 10 months, and he said it to a neighbour, and she was absolutely astonished. Wow. He walked early, he pointed, he could play peekaboo. And then about 15 months of age, he had a very nasty virus and ended up in hospital. And I think that triggered his autism, because I remember a month later saying to his dad, Peter, stop looking at me. And, he's just changed. Something has changed within him. And from there onwards, his behaviour went downhill dramatically. He stopped talking. He stopped being able to feed himself. He had the most horrific temper tantrums with knobs on. And it became very, very difficult for us to take him out. He also became sort of obsessional, and it was things like, coat hangers. He had to have dozens of coat hangers, and he would play with them incessantly and break them and want more coat hangers. And I remember on one occasion, and I have to say I've developed a black sense of humour now since having Peter, because it kept me human. It kept me able to deal with it. Was we went through Marks and Spencer's, and I went with a friend, and he was in his pushchair. And when we got to the end, he had about 30 or 40 coat hangers on both arms. And I turned round, and all of Marks and Spencer's was literally covered in clothes that he'd pinched the coat hangers from. So you can imagine I was a bit embarrassed with that one.
One that you look back and you're laughing at, but probably at the time didn't feel all that funny. That must have been really a scary time to have had a child that, showed no indication of what was to come and then just quite suddenly changed.
It was heartbreaking, because, you've got a child that's developing so well, and then suddenly that child loses every skill he's got and has had the ability to sort of wreck our family. We had to completely revisit how we managed our life with the other children, because he wasn't an ordered person. He was a devastator. He was a window breaker. He would break anything he could get his hands on. We ended up, he developed quite a few food allergies in that time, and we had to really be careful as to what he could eat and deny him access to things like the fridge and the freezer. They all had to have bolts on, and we put those little sort of spider locks on all the doors. So he had a room that he played in. It was our dining room. We gave it over to him and he played with everything, and it was totally safe in there. And the living room was for everybody else. And it was things like, as well, like we couldn't have change routines or anything like that at all. He became very, very rigid, and he also developed no fear whatsoever. And so, a couple of examples: he would jump off the shed roof. He was a very, very good climber, and he would jump from the shed roof at the age of 4. And he would jump off the top of a high climbing frame into a paddling pool and never hurt himself. So he was always sort of challenging my mothering skills of what I was used to in the past.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking, Mary, because I'm always I'm conscious of this, that we often, you know, think about how it affects the parents and we think about how it affects the child with autism, but I'm mindful of the fact that Peter has siblings. How did it affect his siblings?
Well, 3 of them were older, and they dealt with it better because they had social lives and they were teenagers and sort of dealt with it in their own teenage way. But it was his brother that was 2 years older than him that it affected most. And he used to come straight home from school and go upstairs and listen to Harry Potter. And he's told us now he's an adult that actually it was listening to Harry Potter kept him sane, because he couldn't hear all the hell that was going on downstairs. And I remember also he stopped having friends home, because I remember once he had a friend home and they went into Peter's room. They have to do that to go to have a meal in the kitchen. And Peter had taken his nappy off and had done a poo and was playing with it. And the friend went, "Oh, gross." And from then on, his brother was just too embarrassed really to have any friends home. And it did give him, he had such a hard childhood really, because we literally could not take an eye off Peter at all. If we did, something devastating, literally devastating would happen.
Oh, so incredibly hard. What support did you have, Mary? Did you feel like you had a support network around you at all?
Well, first of all, he had his initial special school, because he went straight to special school, special needs nursery, straight to special school. The headmaster was a wonder to me. And Peter was nocturnal as well. So he used to go to bed between 11 and 2. And that's it. Absolutely it, every single night. And then sometimes he would go back to bed about 6:30 as I was getting the other children up. So I had an agreement with the headmaster that I could take Peter into school when he woke again. And that was fine by him. And often he looked at my face as I arrived, and I'd come out of Peter's classroom and he'd be there with a coffee and a big arm round. And I remember once, on one occasion, he went in to see the school administrator and said, "You know those chocolates I just gave you for your birthday? You're coming in to share them with Mary." Aww. So we sat and ate chocolates and drank coffee, and every time I needed him, he was there. But he kept on. He had been a special school headmaster for over 30 years, and he was coming towards his retirement, and he said he had never ever come across such a child with such challenging needs before. And he thoroughly respected me because he encouraged me to get some respite care, just so one night a week, so I could sleep and Peter could be looked after when he was awake. And it took me a very, very long time to accept that. Because it's such a struggle giving your baby to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though he was older, is that how it felt to you, that it was like giving a baby? Yeah.
Yes, he still now has the mental capacity of a young toddler. So it always will be. Every time I'm now his official advocate. Now he's 28. It's a bit like power of attorney. Yeah. but for someone with learning disabilities that lacks mental capacity. So I sign things like general anaesthetic consent forms, and I agree to stuff on his behalf in his best interests. So you know, it's a journey that will stay with me, and I will be supporting him and looking after him until I die.
How did it present itself as he got older, Mary? Did the challenges get harder for you to cope with? Did you find it easier because you'd kind of got used to them?
It never became easier because he kept on just getting worse.
Yeah.
At about the age of 14, when obviously testosterone was kicking in, his behaviour became more violent. He put a few members of staff from his school into A&E, and one was blue lighted off. And at about the age of 17, I made a big mistake with him, and it's one that I will sort of share with you because I hope everybody's listening. If you've got a child with challenging needs and they are processing something, they are doing an activity that you don't like and you try to stop them, that is a mistake. And I will give you an example. He was pulling down a curtain rail with curtains on it to throw out of the window. You naturally don't want your curtains and curtain rails being thrown out of the window. And I stopped him. So I stopped the process, and he headbutted me, and then hit me a lot round the head. He dislocated my jaw and knocked me unconscious. So that was the time, and working with the school, that he was put on some medication to reduce his anxiety. And again, that was another hard thing to accept, but it gave Peter back to us, the Peter that we could manage and cope with, and he's still on that to this day.
Yeah, I think it's positive to hear stories of medication being an absolute game changer, because there's a lot of stigma around it, and I think for a lot of parents that's a lot to process, to kind of work out whether it's the right thing to do. But you do actually hear a lot of stories that are really positive in the change that they can make for not only the individual but the family as well.
Yeah, absolutely, because if you've got a child that is very, very high on the anxiety scale, actually having some medication that can reduce that anxiety can make his life, the quality of life he is living, a lot better. And obviously the knock-on effect was the quality of life his teachers were experiencing, and us as his parents were experiencing, a lot easier. So it does have a lot of positives.
Did it ever feel a concern that he might end up in a situation where the school that he was at, he would no longer be able to continue there? I think, from a personal perspective, our children are in mainstream, but there's been conversations even over the last year around whether that's the right route and such like. So I just wondered if that is the same when you have a child in a specialist school, and if that is, how did that feel?
First of all, a special school with a child with my son's needs wasn't the right place for him always to be. And special schools are a really amazing place and can let your child thrive. But sadly, whilst Peter was at that school, there was a lot of reorganisation going on, and 2 special schools in the area shut and made one. And it was then at that time it was decided that they couldn't meet Peter's needs at all. Now, at the same time, I was living in a house, the same house, divorced to his dad. Peter, we know that Peter really pushed us both to the absolute extremes. And I would say, honestly, that he contributed to our divorce. At that point, we had an amazing social worker, and she got her boss involved, and they came round to see us one evening and advised the best place for Peter was a residential school. And they helped me find the school, and I found the most amazing school that was newly built, and it was looking for it taken the child really into consideration as well as the staff. So to give you an example, instead of having normal shaped walls, the walls were rounded, so there was no head banging onto the corner of that wall. And that's something that made me think, yes, they've got inside the head of an autistic child, and they understand him. They had breakout rooms and restrooms for the teachers if they became overwhelmed, and they had a rota of teachers in the day. Peter had a one-on-one teacher who was, I cannot tell you how amazing he was. He brought Peter on more than anybody had ever brought him on. So much so that he even got Peter riding a horse.
Oh.
So no reins. He would not hold a rein. But his balance has always been amazing. And so he used to go with him and run alongside the horse, and he got him trotting. He took him wall climbing, because that's something Peter's so good at doing. He never ran out of ideas for him. So and also in the evenings, the staff there would take Peter out into the community to do things far better than I would, because there were 2 to 1, and they obviously they made mistakes. We all do, because he's quite a challenging young man. But if he, on the day he did escape from the 1.8 meter high school fence and climbed over the top of it, there was a member of staff awaiting the other side, and they did celebrate that as an achievement. So it was a wonderful thing for him to do. But the parting for me as his mum was horrific, absolutely horrific. But I can honestly say I had a bit of a breakdown afterwards. And my GP, who became quite a good friend because she had an autistic son in the end, and came to me for advice, she said a lesser person would have had a full breakdown. I just had to go and get some medication to help me through. I was exhibiting grief, I think. And for a few months I was on antidepressants, but again they helped me, and she helped me wean off them. And then I realized that Peter was happy. His life had been enhanced hugely by going to a residential school, and I still got to have him at the weekends and also I have to tell you, I wasn't tired because I'd slept during the week, and I could deal with the nocturnal behaviours of the night.
Grief's a word that we've heard so many times from parents on this journey. Kirsty and I have used it ourselves, where you just never expected this to happen, and then you've got to find your new normal. You've got to learn all about it very quickly to try and support them. Having to sort of let him go to a place like that and having to deal with those emotions must have been really hard. But as you spoke about there, getting sleep, feeling like you're looking after yourself again, I think we can all relate to that, it being so important to look after yourself. Did you feel like a weight had been lifted a little bit as well?
Once I'd come to terms with it, and it's still, if I look back on that time, it still physically hurts because it's a physical pain, isn't it? But then I did realize that I got my life back. His big brother, we could spend time with him and give him the quality time that he'd not had for 8 years. So we were able to be proper parents to him, and at the weekends enjoy Peter's behaviours, because we weren't sleep deprived anymore.
Yeah. Was that a game changer, that school, do you think? Did things, because you got your own time back as well, did things start to change for the better from that school?
Absolutely, hugely, because before that I'd had trying to hold down a job, which was very, very difficult. I could only work part-time, and I found a friend of mine who was also a nursery special nursery support worker. She would have Peter in some hours through a respite care I was given to enable me to work. But coming home to find one of my most heartbreaking times was coming home to find his big brother, 2 years older, with goggles on and big rubber gloves and a plastic box. He knew where Daddy kept it, and he was removing shards of glass from a window that Peter had broken. And that really, it was like somebody had put a knife through me to think that this young boy of 9 or 10 was having to do that, to remove glass from a window. No 8-year-old child should have to do that. And to know that he could have a normal life back was really cathartic for me.
Yeah. And has he spoken of that as an adult now?
Yes, we've talked about it, but I think it's something that perhaps he needs to talk about more. I know he's received counselling as an adult, and I respect his space, and I haven't gone into what he's talked to his counsellor about. But I would imagine living with Peter would play a big part of that.
Yeah, yeah, because it impacts everybody around them, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm interested in what you were talking about in terms of the fact that you were obviously working even whilst Peter was living with you, but people will know you for your passion and the career that you've forged out, and a really successful career. Did that kind of take off after Peter was living in a residential school?
Absolutely, 100%, because I could go to work full time. And I could go away overnight during the week, because a lot of my work involves going into communities, and it might involve a lot of travel, which means an overnight stop, and I could never do things like that. So it gave me a career, and also having a demanding career when you've got something else going on in your life, like Peter, really does help keep your sanity.
Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it gives you something for you as well.
Oh, absolutely, yes, yes.
So important for your sort of well-being and your confidence, and yeah, just knowing who you are as a person outside of just being a parent to a child with, high needs.
Yes.
And Amy and I have spoken over the years about some of the sacrifices that have come from parenting a SEND child in terms of career, and maybe the impact that has had. So and I think that a lot of people listening will be in a similar position, all to different extremes, but I think a lot of us will be in a position where we have had to make sacrifices for our children.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I'll tell you, before I went in to sort of do the work I do now, I was a professional singer. So I used to sort of, with a young family, I could sing at weddings and funerals and other things. But Peter would not allow me to sing. And to this day, he will not allow me to sing, apart from perhaps if it's a Thomas the Tank Engine tune or something, or Postman Pat songs. So I had to give that up as well. And that I went back when Peter went into residential school. I went back as an amateur to join an amateur operatic society, and it was absolutely amazing after 10 years of not being able to sing, to suddenly be able to sing and enjoy it, and that gave me my life back as well, being able to sing again.
Yeah, because it's part of your identity, isn't it? It's part of who you are and what you love to do.
Absolutely, yes.
And for those that don't know, Mary, can you touch on a little bit about what you do and sort of how you got into it and how you sort of got your passion for that as well?
Well, yes, of course. I specialise in property flood resilience. So what people can do to protect their own homes, better protect their own homes from flooding, and how to make adaptation to the home to help it recover after a flood. And the reason I got into it is that I was flooded myself whilst Peter still lived at home. Okay. So we had kitted out his playroom to make it a safe space for him, and we'd got all his toys in plastic boxes and things. And one night we were flooded, and we lost everything, mostly Peter's stuff, and trying to deal with a flooded home and Peter and other children was really horrific. And also I very quickly learned that everybody's got stuff going on in their lives. Next door was agoraphobic and hadn't left her home even to have a baby. Further down the road, an elderly lady had just come back from her husband's funeral and was flooded that night. And I've been told people's stories over the last 25 years, all on similar levels. Flooded one day, diagnosis of cancer another, flooded one day, mum died. But there was no help or support or advice for anybody. And I just thought, this isn't on. So I started trying to give that support and advice to people. So I've written recovery guides. I've written a book on stories about people and the adaptations they've made. And I travelled into flooded communities, newly flooded communities, to offer them advice on recovery and how to better protect their house. And I regularly meet people who say to me, you've no idea, I've been flooded and I've got an autistic child. So you can imagine the look of absolute joy and disbelief on their faces when I say, well, look, first of all, I've been flooded too, and I was flooded with an autistic child. Yeah. So I have written an article for the National Autistic Society on how to prepare for a flood if you've got an autistic child, because it's really essential that you prepare in advance. Routine is so important, isn't it?
Absolutely. I was going to say his whole world would have been upended literally overnight, and it would have looked different. Everything would have felt different. The routine would have gone. It would have smelt different, I would imagine. So literally, in terms of a sensory overload for him, it's hitting every level, isn't it? Really,
it is. And also, I did make the mistake of, because Peter was nocturnal and a window breaker, we were offered alternative accommodation, which we turned down because a hotel, we'd have been thrown out on night one with the amount of noise he made in the night, and going into rented accommodation, it would have been difficult with him smashing windows with his head and breaking things generally. So we chose to live at home. So we moved upstairs, and I ended up having to walk the streets with Peter because he couldn't cope with the noise of all the plaster being knocked off and all the work that the workmen were doing to put the house back to normal. And he wasn't at school full time, and it was a very challenging time, to put it mildly.
Wow. And what amazing work you were doing alongside all of that going on as well.
Yes.
Amazing. And it was through your LinkedIn, Mary, that I saw you raising the point about severe autism and life living with that. Why did you feel you wanted to write something on there? And I know you've written articles as well.
Well, it was Autism Acceptance Month, and I was very aware that there was a lot of sort of autism acceptance, making space for autistic people at work and such like. And I remembered how profoundly tired I was trying to work, and I thought, look, let's write a blog here to raise awareness of severe autism with challenging needs, but really to ask employers to cut some slack for people that go to work and say, look, I've got an autistic child and I'm really tired, I've been up all night, and to not just think, we hear the word autism a lot now, and people may go into work and say, look, I've got an autistic child, but people don't know what that might entail and might not cut them slack. So I did say, look, if you can give a big arm round and a cup of coffee and just sit and listen, it will make such a huge difference. And to make reasonable adjustments to make people's working lives easier. And so I posted it on LinkedIn because I thought that would be a really great place to put it. But I had no idea that it would go quite so viral, because 60 likes on LinkedIn and you're thinking, wow, I've made this, or 100 is extreme. But I think my blog had sort of 3,500-4,000 likes and nearly 300 shares and people commenting and reaching out to me, and it took up a lot of time actually to respond to quite a lot of the posts. But I'm really glad I did it.
Well, it will have resonated with a lot of people, and it's not just parents of children with autism. It's parents of children who have additional needs, where their family life is more complex than maybe they anticipated, and are having to try and work and juggle family life at the same time, and are frankly exhausted and are struggling to, on some days find the mental capacity to be able to perform. And you're still a fantastic employee, but there's just going to have to be a little bit of flexibility in that, isn't there? And I think this is what people are crying out for employers to recognize. So I'm not surprised that it went viral.
Yes, and it made me, every morning I'd go on and say, "Good God, look at it today!" It's gone mad. But I'm really, and I'm really, really glad that it sort of reached out to so many people and got a lot of employers thinking as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you get a lot of employers commenting on it then, Mary, or was it mainly
Yeah, I got a mix of both. It was mainly mostly people who knew somebody or had a child or something like that. There were a lot of employers saying, that's really given me food for thought, and thank you for saying it. And somebody said, because I got a lot of private messages as well, somebody said, my employer's just come up to say something about the fact that, was I okay today? Because they'd read a blog, and thank you for that. So I was really pleased.
That's fantastic. It's amazing because I've spoken about it before, but at my workplace, they are very flexible. They know my situation, and they're always willing to listen, but not everybody is as lucky as that. And I don't think there's anything worse than going to work and feeling like you can't have a bit of extra rest, or you can't leave early, and this huge amount of guilt that you're already feeling, and then you're getting it from your employers. It must be really, really tough.
And also, even people think autistic children, even now, Peter's in supported living, so he's got 2-to-1 care 24 hours a day, because of his challenging needs, and he's epileptic. So that needs a lot of managing, and I have numerous medical meetings for him, and some weeks I can have 3 meetings, and you're in the middle of you've come off what can sometimes be quite an upsetting meeting about something that's happened, and you're straight into another meeting when you've got your professional hat on, and you're still reeling from perhaps a decision you've just made on behalf of your son, and that it can eat into your professional life as well. So again, I'd encourage anybody, if you've got a child like ours, you've got to attend a meeting that is going to take some emotional energy out of you, to let people know that you've had a bit of a crap meeting and you might need 5 minutes and a strong cup of tea.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's having the confidence to talk about it as well at work. And I've always been very honest with my workplace. They are very aware. Obviously, I do the podcast. It's always been something that I've been happy to talk about. My husband doesn't talk about it at work at all. It's not something that he's ever particularly wanted to bring up. So there'll be a lot of people in that situation as well, where they don't feel either that it's not relevant, but actually it is, because you're living this every day.
And I think the world we live in as well, we're far more open than when 28 years ago, when Peter was starting to go through all his behaviours. There was no one really to talk to. You didn't talk about that kind of thing. But today, in today's society, we all talk. And that's why I'm really happy to talk about it, because it just might help somebody else.
Absolutely. Yeah. You talk about Peter's behaviours. How did that impact like your social circle and your friendships and such like across? Because I found myself in situations where my behaviours that my son's exhibited have had significant negative impacts with friendships and such like along the way. Did you find the same?
Oh, absolutely. And I stopped getting invited to things because with the fear that I'd be taking Peter with me. So my friendship circle really, really shrunk. But then I found I'd got friends from special school who then come into your world. But because Peter was severely autistic, and had challenging behaviour, a lot of people at the special schools, children were more able, and I had to sit back and watch them improve and move on and do things that Peter didn't. So then again, they moved on. So you find yourself sort of seeking out parents who have got children with challenging behaviour so that they can totally get you. And the very fact that Peter, forgive, I don't think I've mentioned that, but this on this podcast, but Peter smeared poo every single night, every night, and not having anybody to talk about that to, because talking about poo and smearing poo is really difficult, and I literally had no one to share that with, and even now, Peter does, he's I believe he's got a sort of sensory thing where he likes to hold on to his wee and his poo till the last minute. He likes it. And so when he says toilet, he means now. So if you're on the outside lane of the M42 motorway near Birmingham, it's not really very convenient. And one day he did, and luckily you've obviously both got a good sense of humour. But one day he had a pair of shorts on, and he did the worst, and it was quite loose. And so we were driving him back to his house, and he decided he was going to take those shorts off. Stood up in the car, 6'3" big man, waving his pooey shorts all around the car. We have a sort of plastic screen which divides him from the driver for safety reasons. And I said to my husband, who was driving, please put your foot down. And he said, why? Then he smelt why. But you can imagine, you've got poo flying on the roof, the windows, naked man. And my main fear was somebody with a dash cam would say somebody's flashing his Wilbur on the outside of the 42. So that was a recent thing that happened to me. And another time, toilet, we pulled over, and I thought it was a wee, and it wasn't. And I blinked, and he was stark bollock naked. On a hard shoulder on the ring road of Bromsgrove roundabout near Birmingham. And so it was pouring with rain, and we had to both get our coats and sort of protect his modesty whilst he did the worst, and tidy that up and get him back in the car. Oh dear, I'm going to write a book about his antics.
I think
you
should.
You need to write a book.
Oh, I could tell you, I could go on a whole podcast on poo adventures. I really can.
Peter's poo adventures.
Oh, you do have to find the humour in these
You
things.
do.
But,
You do. Yeah, you do.
Alex's new stim is throwing stones up in the air like confetti. So if we're at the park, I have to be like, everyone out the way.
One day when Peter was at home, you know how valuable red wine is. Yeah, absolutely. I was opening a bottle. He was in the room, but I was opening a bottle of red wine while I cooked supper. And I'd just gone to get the corkscrew, and he picked up the bottle of wine and ran with it and threw it over the fence onto the road.
Oh, no.
And I was thinking, somebody's going to be killed, a windscreen, goodness knows what. And so I had to get my other children to look after Peter while I ran. And there was a whole bottle of wine, not broken, lying on the pavement.
Oh, that was meant for you.
It was meant because that bottle of wine knew how needed it was. It knew how needed it was.
That had to be a Merlot for sure.
It was a Merlot, yes.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, that is brilliant. Let's talk about Peter a bit more, and some of the best things about his personality, and I guess what he's taught you as a person.
He's taught me to have no pride, for starters. He's very, very loving, and nothing beats a Peter hug. The minute I arrive to collect him, he's quite anxious knowing that I'm going to come, and I don't even get to open the door. He opens it, and I'm in his arms, and I mean in his arms. I'm tiny compared to him. And he also likes to sit on my lap, but he sits on my lap facing me. So if my husband's taken a photograph and you literally can't see me because he's so much bigger than me. So his joy at seeing me, his love, which knows no bounds, really, and he doesn't know how strong he is when he's cuddling me. One of the best things about him that I now find funny is that because he has no filters, and he likes McDonald's food. So taking him into McDonald's, he's obviously non-verbal, so he's quite loud. So I've got used to saying to people, I'm sorry, he's autistic. He's I say harmless because he tends to be harmless. But one day we just bought his meal, but he never knows when he's full up. So he helped himself to a burger that somebody else was poised to eat. It was a big, a large man, piercings, tattoos, looked a bit ferocious to me. And he got one of these sort of triple layered things with bacon, and could see
So
he was really looking forward. He was salivating to eat it, and it was just there, and the next second it was in Peter. Peter had got it. So I had to say sorry.
Do you want another burger?
I'll buy another one. But he said, "Oh look, don't worry, love. I totally get it. It's fine." He was really reasonable, and he wouldn't let me pay. And another time we were, those sort of places. It was a House of Fraser where you can go into their coffee place, but you queue with a tray to get stuff.
Yeah.
I always get Peter because he eats lots, and I've learned that if he has a little bit of a lot, he's satisfied. So I get him the children's sort of little boxes. You can put a sandwich and goodness knows what in. And we were queuing up, and I've taught him to queue because he cuddles. I always get my cuddles on the way for queuing, good waiting and cuddles. And there was no sandwich one day, so we queued up, and I said to the lady, "Could we have a cheese sandwich, please? There's not one here." And she said, "Well, just make one." I'm afraid that wasn't good enough for Peter. He climbed over the counter and opened the fridge, emptied the entire contents of the fridge out, and would you believe he found a sandwich at the back, and it was a cheese sandwich. It's like he knew.
He knew.
He knew. It is so surprising. Yeah.
The queue behind me. I couldn't believe it. And the poor ladies were petrified with this big man climbing over the counter for a cheese sandwich.
You laugh about it, Mary, and you've obviously got the best sense of humour. How did it actually feel in the moment? Because obviously there's lots of parents who'll be, this is their lived experience at the moment, and I'm just conscious that obviously time's a bit of a healer sometimes, isn't it? And you look back and you laugh. How did it feel in the moment? In the moment, it's absolutely horrible, because we're all thinking, what are people going to think of us and him? And is he going to get arrested? That is he's not been arrested yet, but it's one thing. I live in fear of him being arrested, and then how we would deal with that, or the police being called out to him. But in the moment, it's really very, very stressful, stressful indeed. But always remember that is just a moment in your life. You will recover from it, and it's hilarious when
you'll have a laugh about it later.
Absolutely. You can have a laugh.
What would be your advice, actually, because that's a really good point, Kirsty, but what would be your advice to people in that moment when that's happening, for those listening that maybe don't have autistic people in their family, or are just listening out of interest? in a situation like that, what is the best approach? Would you want people to help you or just have a bit of kindness?
Yeah, it's kindness. I always say very loudly, I'm really sorry. He's suffers from autism, and I just bung in the word autism very, very quickly. In fact, when he was smaller, I had T-shirts made saying I'm not naughty, I'm autistic. And in the end, I changed them to I'm naughty and I'm autistic, because he is, you know,
He's got a naughty side.
See him thinking, oh, just give it. He's got a huge sense of humour. It's not your normal sense of humour, but he can let me know when he knows that he's been naughty.
Yeah, so I've got that problem with mine.
I also have that problem with mine too. Maybe this is a commonality.
Yes, I think it is. I mean, he's a sly fox. He really is very, very sly, and he's I don't know how he does it. Maybe this is his hidden talent, but if anybody drops their guard or makes a slight human error or mistake, doesn't lock a door, doesn't lock a cupboard, he's watching all the time. His eyes are never still. So if that mistake happens, he's there and he's stolen something.
Yeah, I also think they have really high intuition, and I think that they are very really hyper aware of their surroundings, and they pick up on things that we just don't.
So Mary, we always end on the same question of what advice do you have for people at the start of their journey?
Oh, goodness me. It's a difficult journey as well, because, you know, when we've got a baby, we can get a handbook, can't we, on what to expect from a baby. But when you've got a child with additional needs, it's a minefield, really. And that I would always say talk, get as much help as you can, find parents with older children, join clubs, just reach out to absolutely everybody, and also to be aware that other children may pass milestones sooner than you, and don't compare your child to others. I made that mistake and it became almost unbearable. It's just sort of blind acceptance that Peter is Peter and has got so many loving and wonderful attributes, and just get on with loving them. But always just get as many peers and peer support as you possibly can around you. Never be frightened to ask for help.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Mary, for coming on and talking to us, for being such a brilliant advocate, and for all your other work that you're doing as well, which is fantastic. So thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure.